Okay, the best place to start with the nitrogen cycle is up with atmospheric nitrogen in the air. And there are two things that can happen with this nitrogen. First of all, it can be fixed by mutualistic bacteria growing inside the root nodules of legumes. It can also be fixed by free-living bacteria that are in the soil, and that then forms ammonia in the soil. Once in plants, that nitrogen can then obviously be eaten, consumed and digested by animals, and so the nitrogen-containing compounds will then become part of the animal in the form of DNA. Or proteins. From there, of course, animals can excrete. Any excess protein will come out as urea, but they themselves can also die, and contributing, just like plants do, to nitrogen-containing compounds now just in the detritus, like the leaf litter. This includes, of course, intact DNA, protein and urea. It's from now that the saprobes can come in and start to decompose this material. And that process is called ammonification because it makes ammonium ions. Now is a good place to talk to about that ammonia in the soil that we talked about earlier. That just dissolves in water to contribute also to ammonium ions. These ions are then, by a process of nitrification, converted by aerobic bacteria at first into nitrites and then on into nitrates, which will be a form of nitrogen that you've all heard of, and it's that form that we generally think about that plants can absorb via their roots by a process of absorption and assimilation. So it's now part of the actual plant material again. But there's a further undesirable process, and that is denitrification, which is actually carried out by anaerobic saprobiotic organisms, and they can convert those nitrates back into nitrogen gas. And the exam board are going to care about a couple of things. The role of saprobes is really important. So you can see here on the diagram, just highlighting the stages of the nitrogen cycle that rely upon saprobiotic nutrition. Clearly, ammonification, nitrification, really important processes. Denitrification also, but of course nitrogen fixation also. The other important one is the role of the mycorrhizae. Remember, that's the association between the fungus and the root of the plant. And lastly, application questions tend to look at farming practices. So, for example, the application of fertilisers, which can come in at both ammonia in the soil, but also at nitrate level. Clearly, that's going to improve productivity of the plants. The other area they can look at is to plough and aerate soils, keeping conditions aerobic. Of course, that's going to encourage the nitrification and ammonification steps, which are important, of course, for getting those nitrates, which is the form in which the plants need them. But in addition to that, of course, nitrogen fixation is also an aerobic process. So by ploughing and aerating, farmers are kind of maximising that and therefore the productivity of the plants. It's also important, of course, to minimise denitrification. So farmers tend to see an issue here with if their soil is waterlogged. And so if they plough and aerate them, they'll be better off. The third one is looking at crop rotation. So using legumes, which are a type of plant which have those root nodules with the mutualistic bacteria in them, by every other year or every third year planting crops in a particular field, which are legumes, but actually they're not crops. They will grow there. They will fix nitrogen. And obviously that will then be in the soil, and then instead of harvesting those, just plough them back in at the end. So actually that field has not had any nitrates stripped out by growing crops and then removing them. Actually the opposite. It's those legume plants have actually put nitrate back into the soil, and then they're ploughed back in. So that's kind of the area in which a lot of exam questions will focus. It's not just about sort of the recall, which was the first part of the video. It's about making sure you understand how these things are applied in the real world and why. Remember, the specification is looking particularly at the wording of it, is saying that you need to look at the role of saprobes and mycorrhizae in the recycling of nitrogen and also phosphorus, which we mentioned on the previous video.